So, we need to talk about a headline that you may have missed this week. There was a deal that was reached on Capitol Hill to renew the Violence Against Women Act, and it came with the help of star power, too. Activist and actress Angelina Jolie, who's made several trips to Washington, D.C. in just recent months to push for this very legislation. And it was notable not just because her daughter shared in her advocacy, but by how emotional she got as she shamed Congress for its silence.
The reason that many people struggle to leave abusive situations is that they've been made to feel worthless. When there is silence from a Congress too busy to renew the Violence Against Women Act for a decade, it reinforces that sense of worthlessness. You think, I guess my abuser's right. I guess I'm not worth very much. Most of all, I want to acknowledge the children who are terrified and suffering at this moment, and the many people for whom this legislation comes too late. The women who have suffered through this system with little or no support, who still carry the pain and trauma of their abuse, the young adults who have survived abuse and emerged stronger, not because of the child protective system, but despite it, and the women and children who have died, who could have been saved.
But let me take a step back for a moment, because there's actually more to this headline that should bother all of us. It's frankly unbelievable that we even need to have a Violence Against Women Act, but we do. It's also unbelievable that the Violence Against Women Act was allowed to expire in 2018, but it did. And even in a political climate such as this, frankly, it's unbelievable that it took more than 3 years to negotiate a way to renew, let alone strengthen, that act. But it did. But what is absolutely unconscionable is that it actually came down to the NRA. And why? Because they opposed a loophole known as the boyfriend loophole. What is it? Well, as it currently stands, the act ensured that anyone convicted, not just accused, but convicted, as in due process occurred here, convicted of misdemeanor domestic violence would not be allowed to own or possess a gun. And for the last few years, senators have been trying to expand that prohibition to not just married partners, but to those who live together or those who share a child, but also those who are dating partners or stalkers and others covered by a protection order. But, well, the NRA didn't like it. They opposed a limitation on gun ownership in general, even in spite of the obvious truth that it made women and children more vulnerable to violence, more vulnerable to abuse, and more likely to be killed by their abuser, who would now have the means to kill. I saw this so many times as a prosecutor looking at domestic violence, and the first thing we would ask, of course, is not to have a gun be allowed to be in the possession. But you would think, in examining it, you wonder who should have been more powerful in these negotiations. Women and children who have every right to be protected from violence, or a gun lobbying organization like the NRA. You know, we talk a good game in this country about how we want a government to be of the people and by the people and for the people. But times like this remind us that it is increasingly becoming a government of the lobbyists, by the special interests, and frankly, for the love of money. And even when it means violence against women persists. I guess just as long as you don't upset the apple cart of the NRA, well, apparently the little ladies can take a seat. Now look, maybe altruism isn't your thing. Maybe you only see the bottom line. Okay, well, how about this? Recall that the Air Force was just forced to pay $230 million to survivors and families of those killed in the 2017 mass shooting at the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs. On Monday, a federal judge found the military was mostly at fault, but then to report the shooter's domestic violence-related convictions to the FBI, which could have prevented him from purchasing the semi-automatic rifle that he used in that mass shooting. You realize he fired more than 450 rounds into that church? He killed 26 people, including a pregnant woman. How did the NRA respond? Well, they doubled down on the myth that the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is with a good guy with a gun. When, really, the bad guy with the gun shouldn't have had it in the first place. It's a loophole, though, nonetheless supported by the NRA. But what won't the NRA support? Well, lawful gun owners like maybe Amir Locke or Philando Castile, killed by police officers in my home state of Minnesota. Apparently those aren't the kinds of causes they prioritize. I mean, lawfully carrying a gun and alerting the police of its presence when the car you are driving in is pulled over? I'm not sure this is the right case for us in the NRA. A man sleeping under a blanket jolted awake by a no-knock warrant being executed, even when it wasn't even intended for him? Well, I'm not sure we have the time or maybe the resources. A convicted stalker who wants to carry a gun for the next time he violates a restraining order? Ding, 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 ding. Now that's in our line with our mission statement. And the fact that Congress's mission was thwarted for 3 years because of it? My, that is quite a statement, America. I rest my case.